During Jackson's domination of American politics during the 1820s and 1840s, the school system of America radically transformed. The reform wasn't Jackson's doing, however. It was his opposition party, the Whigs, who led much of the education reform. The Whigs were very focused on reforming education because they thought that if they were to create a school system that teaches their ideals, that they could raise an entire generation to become Whigs. This all culminated in the Common School Crusade, where various individuals who were generally aligned with the Whigs pushed for educational reform. People such as Catherine Beecher fought for women to be allowed to become teachers, and Horace Mann, who redesigned the Massachusetts school system, which later became the nation's model for a school system, and Mary Lyon and Emma Willard, who provided educational opportunities for women. Women become teachers. Daughter of religious leader Lyman Beecher, Catherine was already famous or infamous across the nation, as she was well known for founding the Hartford Female Seminary, where women could get an education. She made many petitions to stop Andrew Jackson's Indian removal. In her essay on the education of female teachers, published in 1835, she argued that women were better suited than men to be teachers. She wrote, "What is the most important and peculiar duty of the female sex? It is the physical, intellectual, and moral education of the children. Woman, whatever are her relations in life, is necessarily the guardian of the nursery, the companion of childhood, and the constant model of imitation. It is at her hand that first stamps impressions on the immortal spirit that must remain forever." Beecher not only thought that women would be superior teachers, but also that having female teachers would create more teachers, as well as more job opportunities for women. Beecher's opinions inspired women across the nation, such as Emma Willard of New York, founded the Troy Female Seminary in 1821, and argued similar views, as did Mary Lyon, founder of Mount Holyoke Female Seminary in Massachusetts. New structures for schooling. While the gender of education was being reformed, the structure of it was as well. The most important of these reformers was Horace Mann. Mann was a member of the Whig Party and Massachusetts legislature. Mann, as a legislator, pushed a bill that created the Board of Education, and for 12 years was its secretary, where he tightened state standards for education, got more funding for schools, raised teacher salaries, and bettered the education of children. Mann wanted schools to follow state-set standards rather than being, how he put it, so many distinct independent communities. He fought to increase the taxes paid towards schools and created normal schools that would offer a year of training to anyone who wanted to become a teacher. Mann valued schools so highly because he viewed them as a necessary moral authority that would instill proper values amongst America's children. His efforts were not free from pushback, however. Many Jacksonian Democrats opposed his educational reform and called for the abolishment of the Board of Education. Another group that sought to reform education was Catholics, as they were displeased by the Protestant influence in public education. They found the textbooks and curriculum to be biased against them, as they contained such terms as deceitful Catholics, amongst others. They sought to create their own school system that would teach Catholicism to their children. They asked the government for funds to create their new school system, but the funding was denied. So the Catholics took matters into their own hands and with their own money started the Catholic school system in America. The nation's textbook, McGuffey's Reader. Cincinnati, 1836, Publishing House Truman and Smith published a series of textbooks, the McGuffey's Primer, Speller, Reader, and 1st through 6th series eclectic readers. The readers served to teach children to read. The readings themselves contained the values parents wanted to instill in children, as they contained patriotic speeches from figures such as Washington, and stories teaching basic morality, such as the wrongness of theft. The reader had the goal of raising a generation of well-spoken democratic citizens who used the common language over regional dialects. These readers shaped generations of Americans as they shaped the pronunciation of the American accent, the morals of the nation, and the ethical norms of the country. Part 2, Democratized Religion, an Introduction. Andrew Jackson once said, "There is no country in the whole world in which the Christian religion retains a greater influence over the souls of men than in America." This influenced Christianity greatly due to it being a democratic and republic religion, and during this period, major religious revivals would occur. Charles D. Finney in New York's burnt-over district. Charles Grandison Finney was an American Presbyterian minister and leader in the Second Great Awakening in the United States. He has been called the father of modern revivalism. Finney constantly struggled with the question of whether true religious belief was consistent with his legal career. Due to his thoughts, he decided to leave his old law profession behind and to now preach in churches in upstate New York. Years later, in 1830, Finney unexpectedly led the largest religious revival ever seen in Rochester, New York. Finney did not seek emotional catharsis from his congregants, but like an attorney, argued his case with logos using wit and wisdom. By the late 1830s, the area along the Erie Canal where Finney preached had become known as the burnt-over district because of the fires of religious enthusiasm that rolled over the region. Lyman Beecher and the growth of voluntary societies. Lyman Beecher, a young minister who defended state support of congregational churches, Beecher would make voluntary interdenominational societies and organizations, growing the influence of religious bodies. These societies depended on the voluntary contributions of the members of several different religious bodies. They represented a new form of cooperation across traditional religious lines in the service of a larger goal to change the culture of America. Beecher's goals as a young minister consisted of a Bible for each family, a school for every district, and a pastor for every 1,000 souls. As a result of these set goals, many voluntary contributions took place just as they had planned. Organizations like the American Bible Society, the American Sunday School Union, the American Education Society, and the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions all made these so-called goals come true. In the world that Beecher and his fellow Protestant evangelists were creating, the separating of the church and state, that the specific denominations would not wield political power, but together these Protestants would help build a culture in which the churches, voluntary societies, and public schools would reinforce common beliefs and practices. Revivalism and moral reform movements. Revivalism and moral reform movements were most of the time dealt with women in some way, shape, or form. Women were crucial to these movements due to the amount of women that participated. Approximately 3/4 of the movement's participants were women. The women usually prayed and lobbied for their husbands and families to convert, which as a result indirectly grew the movements by converting others. There had been many forms of revivalism, including some of the largest, such as the rights of women and the opposition of slavery. Both greatly impacted the United States, but there were many more smaller revivals and movements that inspired others, like the treatment of our prisoners. Prisoners were always looked upon as criminals, scoundrels, hooligans. Whatever the opinions of them may be, they are still human. They still have their rights and are still supposed to be treated as humans even though they made mistakes, just as we make on a daily basis, all of us. So does that make all of us mere citizens? Criminals? No. So instead of harassing them and placing them in solitary confinement, they decided to treat them like others and establish communal areas for the prisoners to interact and to slowly but surely regain their mindset as a normal citizen. Utopian religious communities. The religious enthusiasm of the 1800s also brought about some untraditional ways of thinking as well, and America, with its emphasis on liberty, was the perfect place for these radical experiments to be performed. Communities such as Mother Ann Lee and the Shakers. Ann Lee believed that sexuality was the basis for sin, and that abstinence was the only way to live a godly life. She inspired Shaker communities, who became one of the largest pre-civil movements. Ann Lee was seen as a type of Jesus in the community. The community was united under her and by their community life, but appeal was low due to their demand for celibacy. Another one of these communities was the Oneida community, led by John Humphrey. Humphrey believed that repentance for sin was not enough. He believed that people should just simply stop sinning. He was convinced that people could achieve a union with God so that they could reach a sinless state of being. There was also Robert Owen with his New Harmony community. Owen, after making a fortune, founded a model factory town where he sought to put the spirit of universal welfare into practice. This community was called New Harmony. This community was short-lived, however, and failed in less than a year. Finally, there was the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, founded by Joseph Smith. Smith believed that he found an ancient Indian treasure. He believed that golden plates and magical stones would help unlock Indian history. With the stone, he translated the plates into a book about an ancient prophet named Mormon. This book was known as the Book of Mormon. After writing the book, Smith organized a community in which many came seeking religious truths, and eventually a temple was built with his community. The Mormon is one of the few utopian communities that still exist to this day. Most of these radical religious experiments and utopian religious communities were short-lived, but some, such as the previously mentioned Mormons, are still around to this day. Transcendentalism. In 1838, Massachusetts, Ralph Waldo Emerson delivered the Divinity School address at the Harvard Divinity School. Emerson was giving a speech to soon-to-be ministers when he called them to preach, quote, throbs of desire and hope, end quote, rather than formally known religion. Due to this, he was told never to speak at the school again, but his speech sparked a new idea of religious thinking called the Transcendentalist movement. A group later gathered, calling themselves Transcendental Club, to create a theology that reflected a powerful personal experience of life. Under the leadership of George Ripley, a new utopian community was created. In this society, men and women shared work equally, and the true gender equality was the goal. This movement reflected the impatience with the old ways. People wanted a more direct and immediate experience of divinity. This way of thinking continued to impact American religion. And now some concluding words. During this time period, Jackson and his administration, though very influential, were not the most consequential in regards to American society and culture. During this time of democratized religions and education, the people, not the government, were the most influential shapers of American society. As they redesigned religion in schools, where the country looks to wisdom and knowledge and change the values and information they would spread. Thank you for watching, Father Touch.